2 Samuel chapter 14 verses 1 through chapter 15 verse 22. Now Joab the son of Zeruiah knew that the king's heart went out to Absalom. Now Joab sent to Tikah and brought from there a wise woman and said to her, "Pretend to be a mourner and put on your mourning garments. Do not anoint yourself with oil and behave like a woman who has been mourning many days for the dead. Go to the king and speak thus to him." So Joab put the words in her mouth. When the woman of Tikah came to the king, she fell on her face to the ground and paid homage and said, "Save me, O king." And the king said to her, "What is your trouble?" She answered, "Alas, I am a widow. My husband is dead, and your servant had 2 sons, and they quarreled one with another in the field. There was no one to separate them, and one struck the other and killed him. And now the whole clan has risen against your servant." And they said, "Give up the man who struck his brother, that we may put him to death for the life of the brother whom he had killed." And so they would destroy the heir also. Thus they would quench my coal that is left, and leave to my husband neither name nor remnant on the face of the earth. Then the king said to the woman, "Go to your house, and I will give orders concerning you." And the woman of Tikah said to the king, "On me be the guilt, my lord the king, and on my father's house. Let the king and his throne be guiltless." The king said, "And he shall never touch you again." Then she said, "Please let the king invoke the Lord your God, that the anger of blood kill no more, and my son be not destroyed." He said, "As the Lord lives, not one hair of your son shall fall to the ground." Then the woman said, "Please let your servant speak a word to my lord the king." He said, "Speak." And the woman said, "Why then have you planned such a thing against the people of God? For in giving this decision, the king convicts himself, insomuch as the king does not bring his all die. We are like water splashed on the ground, which cannot be gathered up again. But God will not take away life, and he devises means so that the banished one will not remain an outcast. Now I have come to say this to my lord the king, because the people have made me afraid, and your servant thought, I will speak to the king. It may be that the king will perform the request of his servant, for the king will hear and deliver his servant from the hand of the man who would destroy me and my son together from the heritage of God. And your servant thought the word of my lord the king will set me at rest. For my lord the king is like the angel of God to discern good and evil. The king answered the woman, "Do not hide from me anything I ask you." And the woman said, "Let my lord the king speak." The king said, "Is the hand of Joab with you in all of this?" And the woman answered and said, "As surely as you live, my lord the king, one cannot turn to the right hand. It was your servant Joab who commanded me. It was he who put all the words in my mouth of your servant, in order to change the course of things. Your servant Joab did this. But my Lord has wisdom like the wisdom of the angel of God, to know all things that are on the earth." Then the king said to Joab, "Before now, bring back the young man Absalom, and Joab fell on his face to the ground and paid homage and blessed the king. And Joab said, "Today your servant knows that I have found favor in your sight, my lord the king, in that the king has granted the request of his servant." So Joab arose and went to Geshur and brought Absalom to your house. He is not to come into my presence. So Absalom lived apart in his own house and did not come into the king's presence. Now in all Israel there was no one such. Now in all of Israel there was no one so much to be praised for his handsome appearance as Absalom. From the sole of his foot in him, and when he cut the hair of his head, and at the end of every year he used to cut it. When it was heavy on him, he cut it. His weight. There was born to Absalom 3 sons and 1 daughter, whose names was Tamar, and she was a beautiful woman. So Absalom lived 2 full years in Jerusalem without coming into the king's presence. Then Absalom sent for Joab to send him to the king, but Joab would not come, and he sent a second time, but Joab would not come. Then he said to his servant, "See, Joab's field is next to mine, and he has barley there. Go and set it on fire." So Absalom's servant set the field on fire. Then Joab rose and went to Absalom at his house and said to him, "Why have your servant set my field on fire?" Joab, "Behold, I sent word to you, come here that I may send you to the king to ask, why have I come from Geshur? It would be better for me to be there still. Now therefore let me go into the presence of the king, and if there is guilt in me, let him put me to death." Then Joab went to the king and told him, and he summoned Absalom. So he came to the king and bowed himself on his face to the ground before the king, and the king kissed Absalom. After this, Absalom got himself a chariot with horses and 50 men to run before him. And Absalom used to rise early and stand beside the way of the gate. And when any man had a dispute to come before the king for judgment, Absalom would call to him and say, "From what city are you?" And when he said, "Your servant is of such and such a tribe in Israel," Absalom would say to him, "See, your claims are good and right, but there is no man designated by the king to hear you." Then Absalom would say, "Oh, that I were judge in the land. Then every man with a dispute or cause might come before me, or come to me, and I would give him justice." And whenever a man came near to pay homage to him, he would put out his hand and take hold of him and kiss him. Thus Absalom did to all of Israel who came to the king for judgment. So Absalom stole the hearts of the men of Israel, and at the end of 4 years, Absalom said to the king, "Please let me go and pay my vow, which I have vowed to the Lord in Hebron. For your servant vowed a vow while I live at Geshur in Aram, saying, if the Lord will indeed bring me back to Jerusalem, then I will offer worship to the Lord." The king said to him, "Go in peace." So he arose and went to Hebron. But Absalom sent secret messengers throughout all the tribes of Israel, saying, "As soon as you hear the sound of the trumpet, then say, Absalom is king at Hebron." With Absalom went 200 men from Jerusalem who were invited guests, and they went in their innocence and knew nothing. And while Absalom was offering the sacrifices, he sent for Ahithophel the Gilonite, David's counselor, from his city Gilgal. And the conspiracy grew strong, and a messenger came to David, saying, "The hearts of the men of Israel have gone after Absalom." Then David said to all his servants who were with him at Jerusalem, "Arise and let us flee, or else there will be no escape for us from Absalom. Go quickly, lest he overtake us and bring down ruin on us and strike the city with the edge of the sword." And the king's servant said to the king, "Behold, your servants are ready to do whatever my lord the king decides." So the king went out, and all of his household after him. And the king left 10 concubines to keep the house. And the king went out, and all the people after him, and they halted at the servants passed by him, and all the Cherethites, and all the Philitites, and all the 600 Gittites who followed him from Gath, passing on before the king. Then said to Itti and Gittite, "Why do you also go with us? Go back and stay with the king, for you are a foreigner and also an exile from your home. You come only yesterday, and shall I today make you wander about with us? Since I go, I know not where. Go back and take your brothers with you, and may the Lord show steadfast love and faithfulness to you." But Itti answered the king, "As the Lord lives, and as my lord, whether for death or life, there also will your servant be." And David said to Itti, "Go then, press on." So Itti and the on with all of his men, and all the little ones who were with him. John chapter 18, verses 1 through 24. When Jesus had spoken these words, he went out with his disciples across the brook Kidron, where there was a garden, which he and his disciples entered. Now Judas, who betrayed him, also knew the place, for Jesus often met there with his disciples. So Judas, having procured a band of soldiers and some officers from the chief priests and the Pharisees, went there with lanterns and torches and weapons. Then Jesus, knowing all that would happen to him, came forward and said to them, "Whom do you seek?" They answered him, "Jesus of Nazareth." Jesus said to them, "I am he." Judas, who betrayed him, was standing with them. When Jesus said to them, "I am he," they drew back and fell to the ground. So he asked them again, "Who do you seek?" And they said, "Jesus of Nazareth." Jesus answered, "I told you that I am he. So if you seek me, let these men go." This was to fulfill the word that he had spoken, "Of these whom you gave me, I have lost not one." Then Simon Peter, having a sword, drew it and struck the high priest's servant and cut off his right ear. The servant's name was Malchus. So Jesus said to Peter, "Put your sword into its sheath. Shall I not drink the cup of that the Father has given me?" So the band of soldiers and their captain and officers of the Jew arrested Jesus and bound him. First they led him to Ananias, for he was the father-in-law of Caiaphas, who was high priest that year, who had advised the Jews that it would be expedient that one man should die for the people. Simon Peter followed Jesus. Since that disciple was known to the high priest, he entered with Jesus into the courtyard of the high priest. But Peter stood outside. The disciple who was known to the high priest went out and spoke to the servant girl who kept watch at the door, and brought Peter in. The servant, "You are also one of this man's disciples, are you?" He said, "I am not." Now the servants and officers had made a charcoal fire because it was cold, and they were standing and warming themselves. Peter also was with them, standing and warming himself. The high priest then questioned Jesus about his disciples and his teaching. Jesus answered him, "I have spoken openly to the world. I have always taught in the synagogues and in the temple, where all said nothing in secret. Why do you ask me? Ask those who have heard me what I have said to them." They know he had said these things. One of the officers standing by struck Jesus with his hand, saying, "Is that how you him? If what I said is wrong, bear witness about the wrong. But if what I said was right, why do you strike me?" Then sent him bound to Caiaphas the high priest. Psalm chapter 119, verses 97 through 112. Oh, how is my meditation all the day. Your commandment makes me wiser than my enemies, for it is ever with me. I have more understanding than all my teachers, for your testimonies are my meditation. I understand more than the aged, for I keep your precepts. I hold back my feet from every evil way, in order to keep your word. I do not turn aside from your rules, for you have taught me. How sweet are your words to my taste, sweeter than honey to my mouth. Through your precepts I get understanding. Therefore I hate every false way. Your word is a lamp to my feet and a light to my path. I have sworn an oath and confirmed it, to keep your righteous rules. I am severely afflicted. Give me life, O Lord, according to your word. Accept my freewill offerings of praise, O Lord, and teach me your rules. I hold my life in my hand continually, but I do not forget your law. The wicked have laid a snare for me, but I do not stray from your precepts. Your testimonies are my heritage forever, for they are the joy of my heart. I incline my heart to perform your statutes forever, to the end. Proverbs chapter 16, verses 8 and 9. I have set the Lord always before me. Because he is my right hand, I shall not be shaken. Therefore my heart is glad, and my whole being rejoices. My flesh also dwells secure.